The prosecutors are no longer trying to put YNW Melly behind bars for life. Instead, they are now pushing for the penalty, as the state of Florida filed in 66 pages of new evidence against YNW Melly. The judge announced the prosecutors aren't interested in putting YNW Melly behind bars for life anymore. They instead want the penalty, as the parents of YNW Juvy and YNW Sakchaser want justice for what happened to their boys. Now, in these new pages of evidence, they're claiming that after running ballistics reports, all signs of who did the act towards YNW Juvy and YNW Sakchaser were sitting in Melly's seat inside of the vehicle. Now here's the photo of where everyone was sitting inside of the car. YNW Bortland, being the driver of the vehicle on this night, had YNW Melly sitting directly behind him, with YNW Juvy and Sakchaser both sitting on the opposite side of the vehicle. Using what's called the stick method, they were able to use plastic sticks to match the trajectory of the firearm that was used. The trajectory from YNW Melly's seat showed a perfect match to where YNW Sakchaser and YNW Juvy were affected once they were brought to the hospital. Also, in new evidence reports, it claims that after the act was done inside of the car, law enforcement were able to use YNW Melly's cell phone as a GPS tracking device. They were able to go back in time and watch YNW Melly walking around in a circle motion inside of a parking lot around the time law enforcement believes the act was done. The theory is that after the act was done, YNW Melly stepped out of the car and roughed up the vehicle from the outside using his firearm to make it appear as if it went through a drive-by. Now this theory seems true, as the shells from the firearm that they found outside in the parking lot actually matched the shells that were found under the floor mats inside of the vehicle right beside YNW Melly's seat. If YNW Melly claims that YNW Juvy and Sakchaser sadly passed from a drive-by, then why were the same firearm shells found inside of the vehicle as the ones outside? As shown in the evidence files, law enforcement states, and I quote, "These particular cell phones, which were both iPhone 10s, were on the T-Mobile network." And so T-Mobile has a very interesting feature where it will tell you the environment the cell phone is in. So from these cell phone records, I can tell you the exact moment demons got out of the car and staged the drive-by location. The two cell phones in YNW Melly's pocket, from my understanding, is a huge deal in this court case. One iPhone being his personal phone and the other one being his business phone. On YNW Melly's personal cell phone that law enforcement had put a warrant out from his music manager had case-breaking evidence on it. In the court files it states, and I quote, "Then also, we have a video of Mr. Demons admitting to doing an act towards two individuals in the head." This video was on Mr. Demon's cell phone, which was brought to my office by Jameson Francis, and that is how we had that, and that is all of the evidence that Your Honor has. Now, Jameson Francis in this court file is otherwise known as 100K Management, who is YNW Melly's music manager. He was also a manager for rappers such as King Von. Law enforcement put out a warrant for this cell phone to retrieve it from the manager, so he handed it in. They then scanned through the cell phone and find a video of YNW Melly literally admitting to doing it, while also doing a hand gesture in the video of him basically using a firearm. So all of this evidence is crucial against YNW Melly when you hear the timeline of what happened the day that Sakchaser and Juvy sadly passed. Now, in the court files, it states that on October 26 in 2018, at roughly 3:30 a.m., YNW Melly, Juvy, Sakchaser, and Bortland were all at a recording studio in Florida working on a new album for Melly. Video surveillance from the block of the recording studio showed the four boys hopping into their Jeep and heading home. The driver of the vehicle being Cortland Henry, otherwise known as YNW Bortland, had Melly sitting directly behind him, with Juvy and Sakchaser sitting on the opposite side of the car. After running ballistics reports, law enforcement believes that the vehicle was pulled over to the side of the road. A distraction was then made inside of the car to catch Juvy and Sakchaser off guard, while YNW Melly did the act towards them in the vehicle, sitting in the back left seat. Now, law enforcement believes this as they used the stick method, as I mentioned earlier, and the trajectory of the firearm matches perfectly to where YNW Juvy and Sakchaser were affected. They also believe that Melly is the one who did it, as he sent his girlfriend at the time 2 weeks later a Snapchat saying, and I quote, "I kept Bortland with me because at the end of the day, he did one of the realest stuff in my life." Now this could be YNW Melly's way of thanking Portland for remaining loyal and not snitching and actually going through with the plan. As shown on GPS tracking, the Jeep was then brought into a side parking lot where nobody was in sight, and that's where YNW Melly hopped out of the car and roughed it up in a 360-degree motion, making it appear as if a drive-by happened. This would then be YNW Portland's excuse for what happened to Juvy and Sakchaser when he finally brings them to the hospital. This could explain as to why it took 40 minutes for Melly and Portland to get Juvy and Sakchaser medical attention after a drive-by happened. With YNW Portland driving the two men to the local hospital, YNW Melly ended up sprinting home. YNW Melly did not even go with Portland to the hospital with his two best friends in the car. Instead, he took it on foot and started running home. It wasn't until February 13th where YNW Melly was then brought into jail for the act that led to Juvy and Sakchaser's passing. YNW Portland was also arrested for 2 counts of accessory and helping YNW Melly cover it up. At YNW Melly's latest court hearing, everything was laid out on the line. We found out that YNW Melly's trial is officially beginning on March 7th, which at the time of this recording is actually in a few days. We found out that all of the evidence I shared in this video has been really eye-opening for Melly and his lawyers, and at this current moment, prosecutors believe they have gathered enough evidence for the trial to start after a long waiting few years. The prosecutors even requested the Broward County judge to force YNW Melly to provide his DNA in order to completely solve the case. They asked for all of YNW Melly's body measurements as well, meaning the length of his arms, legs, and his body weight, as the prosecutors are looking to create a model of YNW Melly's body. They would use this to recreate the scene on what they believed happened, so their case looks a lot better in court. YNW Melly and his lawyers agreed to the prosecutor's terms. In return, they would like to have a speedy trial. This means that the court date on March 7th will not be able to be pushed back or delayed for any period of time. YNW Melly and his lawyers know it's taken law enforcement years to find any sort of significant evidence on the rapper. And who's to say that they don't try to delay it even further once the trial is about to begin? If a speedy trial is accepted in court, prosecutors will not be able to push back the trial, or else YNW Melly will be released from jail with all charges dropped under the Florida law. This would be YNW Melly's best chance of being released if they do try to push it back, as the evidence and everything I shared in this video is stacking up against him in a major way. This has been the YNW Melly story. I hope you enjoyed. It's been District Trending, and I'm out. Peace.